Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's Motor Trade Radio podcast. Powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. With Philip Nothard and Curtis Hutchinson, bringing you all the chatter that matters.
Well, Phil, this podcast goes out on the last weekend of August, and just ahead of the plate change on Monday. So there's a lot of busy listeners out there, I suspect.
Yeah, there will be, and I suspect. I mean, it's always, I don't know. You've got to question when a month end finishes at the weekend, and obviously we know a lot of pre-reg or tactical activity or last-minute registrations tend to happen on the last day of the month. But maybe with it being August and the focus being on September, that won't be as bad in at this time. But yeah, there'll be a lot of busy dealers, administrators, etc., trying to get things ready for the 1st of September. So yeah, the new plate comes out on Monday. So it'll be. Unfortunately, that means that the year is now heading towards the fourth quarter, Curtis, on a negative note, unfortunately.
Yeah, I know. and talking about Q4, because we interviewed Chris Plum from Cap HPI during the week, and he was talking about trade values over the course of August. But we did actually get him to talk about September and Q4. So I think that's the first time we've actively started talking about Q4. But we'll have an extract from that interview in today's pod. But the full interview is available in your podcast feed.
Yeah, pushing his crystal ball out a little bit further there, thinking about what that year end starts to look like. But also on today's podcast, we've been joined this week by the industry guru Ian Godboll, who will be sharing his top tips on looking at running successful plate change events. So I know, looking at Ian's social feeds, he's been out there helping the sector and dealers in particular on how they get activity for that new plate in the month of September. So do stay tuned to the halfway break to listen to the latest top tips from Ian Godbold.
And our thanks to Nick Thomas, the MD of Shangang UK, who we had on the podcast just a couple of months ago. And he's been in touch with us this week. He sent us the press release, as he said he would, he promised he would, about the launch of the brand in the UK, which is happening in September. And when we did interview him back in July, he said he'd share the first wave of dealer signings with us, and that's exactly what he's done. So the first wave of dealers include Ancaster, Parks, DM Keith, Stoneacre, and Lookers. And Lookers will actually have the flagship site, Lookers Star City in Birmingham. So that will be a total of 20 showrooms opening from launch in September, with 30 more planned by the end of the year.
Yeah, and I have spoken to Nick, and he's going to share with us in due course some of the other dealers, because that's not the whole list. There are others that are kind of coming on. I think the launch is the 16th of September officially. So there'll be others that will be released as well over the next week or two. So if you've not been mentioned in this press release and you are a dealer that's taken on the Shanghang franchise and going live on the 16th of September, don't worry. You will be getting a mention in due course from Shanghang. But I think just finally, before we sort of head into the headlines, Curtis, there's obviously the first two cars now qualifying for the government top level, so tier 1 for the electric car grant, or otherwise known as the ECG, of the 3,750 discounts, has just been announced, haven't they?
Yes, and we've been keeping close tabs on this and reporting on some of the models that have made it onto the Tier 2, the £1,500. But as you say, this is the first two models for £3,750. That's the top band. And it's the Ford Puma Gen E and the Ford e-Tornado Courier. Now, the Ford Puma EV is particularly significant because that will bring its price down to £26,200. £245, which will actually make it cheaper than the equivalent petrol model, which costs £26,580. So this could actually be a game changer for Ford because, as we know, it's not just the Ford's best-selling vehicle, but it's actually the best-selling vehicle in the UK in the year to date. So that's quite a compelling proposition, isn't it?
It is, yeah, and say there is a full lineup of all the vehicles as they get announced on the government website, but obviously now that's 28 eligible vehicles from Alpina, Citroen, Nissan, Renault, Vauxhall, Cupra, and VW. In addition to those, now Ford's there, but as Curtis just said there, the majority of them are on the tier 2, which is the £1,500 grant from the government there. So we'll keep you updated as we hear more.
You're listening to all the chatter that matters on the Motor Trade Radio podcast. If you're a supplier and would like us to profile your business and reach our audience of dealer bosses, managers and decision makers on one of our dedicated supplier specials episodes, get in touch with Curtis and Philip at motortraderadio@yahoo.com.
And companies already featured in our suppliers special include iVendi, ETT, Generational, Tracker, MTC, Jigcar, Checkvic, Car Care, and Auto Chat. So if you'd like us to profile your business, then do get in touch with myself or Curtis and via LinkedIn or direct on email. We can feature you on this. And watch out, our latest supply special drops on Monday morning. It'll be on your podcast feed at 9 a.m. this Monday morning, and it's a good friend and a good follower of the podcast, and that's Nancy Rignall, who's talking about her prospecting dynamics business. Nancy will be a familiar name with many of the listeners, and she's had a high-profile career at Ford, McPhee, Agbaris, before launching Prospecting Dynamics. So our chat covers Nancy's approach to inquiry management analysis and how she's helping dealers maximize sales and retention on inbound and outbound calls, plus her views on CRM best practices, how new and used EV inquiries should be approached, and lots more. So don't miss that on your podcast feed on Monday morning.
You're listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by Motors.
Headlines this week come from Car Dealer, Motor Trade News, Motor Trader and the Daily Telegraph. In the first half of this week's pod, we'll look at the latest used car trends, starting with the welcome stability in trade values continuing through August, reports Cap HPI. Used EV retail prices are currently falling twice as fast as hybrids, while sub-2-year-old used car stock levels hit a record high. Then in the second half, Judge Service Research finds customers still value the opportunity to use dealer finance. Dealers report new EV market is now at a tipping point. And Amazon Autos strikes a deal in the US with rental giant Hertz to sell its defleeted cars. And here's the first of those news stories as Cap HPI's Chris Plum talks us through how trade values performed in August.
Let's start off with, walk us through the main headline for trade values at that 3-year 60 mile benchmark and how they compared, as Curtis said there, with previous August and into September movements.
Yeah, no problem. Well, August has turned out to be a fairly positive month for used car values and probably taken many of us by surprise just how strong the market's been. So we are reporting the strongest August to September movement since we've introduced Cap Live, if we exclude the 2 affected COVID years. So at the benchmark of 3 years, 60,000 miles, values moved just by 0.1% down, or a negligible £21 to be precise. And this is fairly strong when you say put it in or in the context of historical movements, because since Cap Live was introduced in 2012, the averaged August movement to September has been 0.7%, with the largest decline of -2% in 2023, which is the start of that kind of big realignment we saw at the back end of 2000, in the last quarter of 2023, with the smallest being 0.2% down in 2017. So this 0.1% movement is generally really strong, and showing just how much demand there is for used cars in the market at the moment.
And what's your take on? I mean, we talk about marginal movements so far this year. I mean, some people refer back to normal seasonality, but some of them are less than what we'd probably previously expect, as you said there, in terms of those pre-pandemic movements. What's your take on what's happening for the year to date of the trend so far?
Yeah, year to date, it feels like the market is performing more or less, well, probably slightly stronger than sort of seasonality, because every month so far this year, I think we highlighted this last month, apart from March when the movement that we made was in line with those seasonal averages, has been more positive than the historical averages. With actually a strengthening in the last 3 or 4 months as we've sort of come through the summer. Last year, we called the summer, or it was dubbed the summer of stability, because over sort of June, July, and August, values moved by sort of values moved by 0.1% through that summer period. This year, it's the same. It's slightly worse, minus 1.2%. But we're seeing that similar pattern of strength continuing through the summer months, and that is generally down to that lack of demand in the market. One thing we found sort of quite fascinating to track, by about the 5th of the month, 5th of August, the average movement of 3 years 60 down in our Cap Live product with minus 0.5%, and it strengthened from that point onwards. And we've seen that in the last couple of months, the first half of the month being weaker than the second half, and there being a little bit of stability come mid-month, and then strength come towards the end. It was more prominent this month. I think that is because the supply is still restricted for 3 to 5 year old vehicles.
And I mean, you do highlight that in the editorial, talking about those notable trends of that imbalance between supply and demand. Is it that 3 to 5 year market that you're referring to as sort of new? The nearly new market is obviously driven by some of the new car activity at the minute.
I think so. For the last couple of months, we've been saying how well balanced supply and demand has felt. But as we got, as I say, to about the 5th, halfway through August, I'd probably say that dynamic has changed, and the market for a long time has felt, or so far this year, has felt that there's been an imbalance. And that imbalance is there's more demand than there has been supply coming in. And it is around that 3 to 5 year old, even 3 to 6 year old vehicles we're hearing, where that true retail sort of primary stock profile, that's where the strength is. And it is still being affected by those 3 million cars that we lost during the COVID period, and then the subsequent supply chain shortages. We've seen or been reporting that many auctions have said through the month that there's been decline in stock, and that they see this continuing towards the back end of August this month, and even in the first couple of weeks of September. So we don't see much of a change in this at the moment, this imbalance.
Well, as always, I mean, it's always great, isn't it, Curtis, having Chris Plum on and giving that sort of overview of the market. And as we said on the intro, I mean, not only covering what that market looks like in the month of August as we get into September, obviously touched on that stability, didn't he, returning for the third month around battery electric vehicles, but also in the full interview there that's on your podcast feed, he does share what he thinks now as we head into the month of September and what to expect as we start to not necessarily close off the year. I think it's a bit negative to talk about closing off the year in the month of September. But as we're towards the end of the Q4,
slow down.
Slow down. Let's not wish the year away too quickly. But a great chat there with Chris.
Yeah, and definitely worth heading over to the full podcast. It's a standalone episode because although it was just a slight dip over the course of August, there was a lot of detail behind it, and there was winners and losers. So do check out the full pod. So first story this week comes from the Daily Telegraph. And the headline there is electric cars plummet in price twice as fast as hybrids. So quite a dramatic headline there, which possibly doesn't tell the full story because it's looking at research that I know, Phil, you've been heavily involved with at Cox Automotive, looking at residual value performance. But it's not so much about the weakness of EVs, but the strength of hybrids, isn't it?
Yeah. I think really, as you say there, I mean, they've taken the context and created a very sensational headline there, as they do. Let's not kid ourselves.
Yeah.
That's what they do. Remember them days, Curtis?
I certainly do. Yeah, never let the truth get in the way of a good headline. Yeah.
No, but I think clearly what is starting to present itself, which is what we're trying to call out. Obviously we know EVs have had heavy depreciation. A lot of that is obviously at the time. The residual values or expectations performance back in the early days was probably higher than reality for those vehicles. Plus, there's been a lot of changes in terms of choice and entry points. But trying to think about now, talking a lot more about hybrids as that stepping stone, that alternative fuel. So really trying to talk about new energy vehicles more than just pure EVs, because that there is a market for hybrids, there is a market for plug-in hybrid vehicles. And even then, if you think about, we were just talking about Nick Thomas at Shanghai, and if you think about some of the others with BYD, JQ, Ramoda, these are the classes, the Chinese new entrants. They're all coming in with hybrid technologies, be it soft hybrid or full plug-in hybrid technology. So this is really trying to say that there is a market. Hybrids are performing well from what we're seeing in the wholesale data for both the standard hybrid and the plug-in hybrid, that as buyers sort of see them as that alternative to a petrol or a diesel vehicle, as those vehicles become ever more scarce in the used vehicle market.
Yeah, and the research, when you start to dig down into it, the research you did at Cox Automotive found in 2022, hybrids retained 90% of their value within the first 2 years of their lifespan, while EVs held 88%. So not as dramatic as the headline suggests. And just tying in with something that Chris Plum was telling us about the August trade values, because CAP HPI actually tracked an increase in EV values for the first time this year. I think first time
Yes.
since October. So yeah, the market is changing, and EVs they did go through massive falls over certainly the course of 18 months or so, but they appear to be steadying, and we could be seeing the first signs of that now.
Yeah, and I mean, we'll come on to a story right at the end of today's podcast from where dealers have given their opinion about used EVs and potentially the tipping point of them. But clearly, there's a lot more product in the market. They are becoming at a price point now that they are becoming more affordable. There are a lot more dealers now starting to invest and buy battery electric vehicles. We know that some of them have got to a point that they actually look very, very good value against their ICE equivalent vehicles these days. So I think that it is starting to shift a little bit, and as Chris pointed out, we're starting to see stabilisation and increases in some cases where used value starts to look too cheap. It starts to look like a very credible used proposition for the right buyer of that vehicle, the one that has the charging infrastructure, has the domestic and the destination charging for them. So yeah, it is starting to change, and there is comments in here from Toby Poston, who's the BVLA, who said last month that used EV values are falling relentlessly, destroying the value of an Epic on an Epic scale. And the industry leaders include Mr. Poston have written to the government calling for greater support help for used EV market. Now, we're still waiting, but I don't know. I'm not sure that will ever come. And I think in the meantime, the values are firming up a little bit. Infrastructure's getting a little bit better. Knowledge and expertise is getting a little bit better across the sector, but there's still a lot to do.
Yeah, and that reference to last month would be July, and as we've just been discussing, August was a more positive picture, but definitely one that it will continue to make the news because it is an easy headline, isn't it?
It is, yeah. But we'll head over to Motor Trade News now, and saying in here that sub 2-year-old used car stock levels at record high, and this is from Indicator, saying it also found that stock between 3 and 4-year-old reached a record low this month, accounting for 23% of all stock. So we now are really, this is starting to see the results of the pandemic short supply period, isn't it, now in that used car market?
Yeah, definitely with those 3 and 4-year-olds. So the research by Indicator found that the volume of sub 2-year-old used stock reached a record high in August, with 31% of all used cars fitting into that bracket. So that's pretty much a third of all used cars. And it also found, as you said, the stock between 3 and 4-year-olds reached record lows this month, accounting for 23% of all stock. And the story goes on to say that Indicator attributes this to the COVID fallout due to the restricted supply of new cars around 2021 and delayed fleet replacement schedules. So we're still seeing that working through the used car market.
Yeah, and Dean Merritt, who's the head of UK sales at Indicator, said that their used car data shows just how long it has taken to flush the impact of the COVID through to the used car marketplace, and saying that typically 36 to 48-month-old used cars are the sweet spot for both wholesale and consumer demand from an age, mileage and price perspective, and currently demand is exceeding supply, and saying that the majority of used car dealers are now stocking the Tesla Model 3, as it is one of the country's most coveted used EVs. So, again, there's a lot in this one now. So, there is people going about that Tesla 3, but it's still a lot of products and a lot of car for the money, isn't it?
Yeah, and it doesn't matter what happens to Tesla on the sort of international scene, and certainly, Elon Musk earlier in the year, there's still huge demand for the Tesla Model 3.
Yes, exactly. So I'm sure we'll continue to hear a lot more about this one.
But we'll be back with the rest of the week's headlines after this top tip from industry consultant and friend of the pod, Ian Godbold.
You're listening to all the chatter that matters on Motor Trade Radio, powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. This is your weekly one-stop shop for all the biggest car retailing headlines from across the media. Available on demand, wherever you are, on your podcast feed. Next up is car retailing industry guru Ian Godbold, sharing his top tips on how to steer your business to success.
Hello everyone, we're heading into another plate change month and the most important month in Q3. With a new government grant available on many EVs, the opportunities are huge. What continues to surprise me, however, is when I hear dealers say the new car sales are tough right now. Then you ask about their marketing activity, and you often find they're running events that are at best a tick-in-the-box exercise. Recently, I've been amazed by the results of new car events powered by booking software platforms. With integrated communication via email, SMS and WhatsApp, customers can book their personalised time slot online. Even better, you can see if they've opened the invitation, started filling out the form or abandoned it, giving your team the perfect chance to follow up and secure the appointment. And yet, this is still one area where the sector still struggles, and that's prospecting. It's surprising because these customers already know your brand, have purchased from the dealer previously, and engaged with your salespeople in the past. As sales professionals, prospecting should be a daily habit. What's exciting though is the rise of smarter technology that's making a big impact for dealers, and that is virtual assistants, otherwise known as VA, that can engage customers through SMS and WhatsApp and provides follow-ups at a time that suits the customer, helping increase appointment booking rates significantly. In fact, we are seeing VAs become the number one appointment bookers for dealers. When you combine this with multi-send personalised video, plus appointment confirmations, you have the opportunity to create the most successful sales events you'll ever run. With this new tech, this promises to be a hugely successful month. If you want to know more and get ahead of your competitors, reach out to me at Ian Godbold at igcdigital.co.uk or simply drop me a message on LinkedIn. Here's to a successful month and a strong finish to Q3, and I'll see you all again very soon.
You can't help but feel upbeat when you listen to Ian share his views on the top tips there, and it's massively timely, and as we said at the offset of the podcast today, that on Monday we've got the supplier special from Nancy, who is really talking about that prospecting, that outbound calls and structured, and we do talk at the end of that chat with Nancy about when we talk about the market being a little bit quiet, but actually when you start to look at the statistics around lost inquiries and lost inbound and outbound follow-ups and things like that, there is a lot that the dealers can do.
As highlighted by Ian, and he does make the point that September is such a key month. If you're going to be targeting prospecting, September is the month, but it should really be all year round. But there's possibly more opportunities around that plate change. So as Ian says, do reach out to him on LinkedIn. He's keen to talk. Do find him there. So back to the headlines. The next story is from Motor Trade News, and the headline there is "Dealers that offer finance options rated higher finds Judge Service." So this is some research that I worked with Neil Adley at Judge Service on for this particular press release, and really looking at finance and what customers are thinking about finance, because obviously it's been in the headlines a lot over recent weeks. And the research found that customers still appreciate being offered the opportunity to buy a car using dealer finance, and research of 33,000 lost sales carried out by Judge Service actually found that those dealers who offered finance achieved a higher net promoter score than those who did not. And this significantly raises the likelihood of dealers being recommended by customers to family, friends, or online. And additional research by Judge Service also identified that 92.5% of car buyers are satisfied with the explanation of finance provided by dealers. And that figure has actually remained consistent since 2022. So there's been a lot of noise in the industry about finance, but there's a bit of clarity here as to what customers actually think.
Yeah, and it follows up with you're saying that 85% of used car customers that go on to purchase said that they had been offered finance by the dealers, and of those that did not take it up, 2/3 use their own funds. So yeah, I mean this is great. I mean it's very timely, obviously, in terms of the discretionary commission and Supreme Court findings, isn't it, that finance remains core of within that dealer network. And Neil Adley, who's the managing director of Judge Service, said that the research backs up the common sense view that car buyers value being offered finance by dealers and are highly likely to convert, and that furthermore, the vast majority of car buyers continue to be satisfied with the finance explanations given by showroom sales staff. And just finally, just to close that off, that dealers should be encouraged by these findings and to ensure that every buyer is given the opportunity to consider their finance options whilst having processes in place to maintain compliance all the way through the sales process. So clearly there, Curtis, highlighting that, if you do offer the finance, it is taken very positively by the consumer. It does convert sales. And obviously, if it's just done within a seamless and efficient compliant process, it does work.
Yeah, and it ends up boosting your net promoter score. So, there's a lot of wins in there for dealers.
Definitely. And heading over to motortrader.com now, sticking with dealers, and this is dealers say electric car market is at a tipping point. So this is from the recent Startline used car tracker for August, saying that the majority of dealers, 93%, say the used car market is close to a tipping point, with motorists now much more interested in going electric, and saying that it also shows that 53% think that buyers are much more comfortable with electric cars, and 51% that they are becoming just another car in stock. Now, I don't know, what's your thoughts on this one?
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because we do talk a lot about EVs on the podcast. I mean, I would say most weeks, probably most of our stories are around EVs now. So we've certainly reached the tipping point on the podcast. And this research, I mean, we do reference the Startline used car tracker pretty much on a monthly basis, and it's a good piece of research. And this particular research is based on 300 consumers and 60 dealers, so responses from them. And Paul Burgess, CEO of Startline Motor Finance, actually says it perhaps isn't a surprise to see a majority of dealers believing a pivotal moment for electric cars is approaching, but the very high degree of backing for this idea is something of a shock. Essentially, our data shows electrification is very close to being accepted fact of the used car market. So, but Paul indicating there that the findings have come as a surprise to him. The level of the support for or level of interest in EVs, especially used EVs.
Yeah, and I think the context with some of this, and it's not really highlighted in the story. I think that there are indications that the franchise dealers are very much transitioning to a more electric profile. I think I've seen reports in excess of 80% of franchise dealers have EVs as part of their stock profile, but independents are still sort of a fifth or below stocking EVs. So there's still a significant disparity between independent dealers transitioning to an electrified used car profile compared to franchise dealers. And I suppose there is an element that franchise dealers, with their relationship with the manufacturer and the manufacturer's transitioning to EV, and that drives demos, courtesy cars, etc., there is that transition that will be quicker than your independents, that there's a little bit more of a financial risk for independents transitioning to an EV. But I think clearly, as you said, Curtis, it's a tipping point with us. We talk a lot more positive, the conversation with Chris Plum there, and the values of EVs. We're seeing it in terms of the percentage of cost new, in terms of wholesale performance now that it's starting to stabilise out. So, we are maybe getting to that point now that EVs are now becoming a more common fuel type within the marketplace.
And finally, this week, a story from Car Dealer under the headline Amazon to launch used car sales after agreeing landmark partnership with Hertz. So, this is a US story at the moment. And Amazon Autos, we've reported on Amazon Autos launching, I think it was probably last year, it was certainly within sort of recent years. And Skoda was the first OEM to go on Amazon Autos to sell both new and used cars, as well as Amazon in the US selling used cars for various dealer groups and supermarkets. But this indicates that Amazon is stepping up its interest in the used car market. And yeah, we have talked in the past about newcomers coming into the industry wanting to be the Amazon of used cars. And this is very much Amazon now becoming the Amazon of used cars, if you see what I mean.
Yes.
And for them, in terms of who would you choose to partner up with in the States, and it would be Hertz. Hertz, massive daily rental and leasing operations, so a ready source of used cars there.
Yeah, as you say there, it is a deal over there in the US, saying that it's only offered there currently there in the US, but it'll allow shoppers to browse through approved used cars online, similar to the model adopted by, as you said there, those in some of the disruptors in the UK there. But buyers will then be able to arrange finance and purchase the vehicle before picking them up from a nearby Hertz car sales lot. You can tell the Americanism there, can't you?
Yeah,
The car sales lot. And that the scheme is initially being rolled out at the Hertz sites in Dallas, Houston, Los Angeles, Seattle, but it does have plans in place to expand it to 45 locations across America, should it prove successful. Now, obviously, that's the latest a development there from Amazon after its Autos platform, following a deal with Hyundai to sell new cars online. So we know we've talked about those new cars with Hyundai, obviously UK with the Skoda proposition as well. So it does. I mean, I remember years ago about Amazon getting involved with the sale of vehicles, and it were like, no, they won't do. But you've just got to think about it. Their customer base, their customer reach is immense. It's huge in terms of their marketplace and where they can offer these vehicles to.
Yeah, I think you're right, because we have seen players come and go over the years, dipping into the market and then exiting. But Amazon does appear to be playing a long game, because I recall writing about Amazon probably about 10 years ago, looking at the used car market, looking at selling cars online, and it's become a reality. And this is a particularly good alliance, and they will be tracking its success very carefully before considering other international markets.
Definitely. So hopefully we do listen to that full interview there with Chris Plum from earlier on in the week on your podcast feed. That snippet was really just looking at that movement from August into September, but we've got a lot more detail by the sectors, the fuel type performance in August as we move into September, but also, talk to them about the sentiment coming out of the market as we head into September and the Q4 of 2025. And don't miss, as I said there, the supplier special. It'll be on your podcast feed, 9 a.m. Monday morning with Nancy Rignall. Grab yourself a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, or whatever your choice is on a Monday morning. Very fascinating, great chat with Nancy, and it's certainly not one to be missed, was it, Curtis? You Definitely. Can see why she's so respected across the industry, and do listen to her career history as Curtis sort of describes it at the start of the chat there. It's fascinating.
Yeah, definitely. Don't miss that one. But that is all for now. So many thanks for joining us on the Motor Trade Radio podcast. We wish all our franchise dealers well from Monday onwards with the plate change. Hope it all goes well for you. But until next week, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.
Thank you for listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. We'll be sharing all the URLs from this week's headlines on Monday morning. To make sure you receive them, just subscribe to the free newsletter on our LinkedIn page. Just search Motor Trade Radio Podcast.